I think we are now back for our next session, and this time we are going to talk about using blockchain to bring transparency to the food supply chain, together with Will Taylor, who is a president at Grow United. Hi, Will.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you for joining. And I think without further ado, we can proceed to your presentation, and we can now see your presentation. You can just say a couple of opening words, introduce yourself, and we are good to start. Good luck to you.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. So, my name is Will Taylor. I am the co-founder of Grow United, which is a company that launched the Grow blockchain. And our goal is to harness blockchain technology to nourish people, animals, and the planet. And so my goal today, if you look at the kind of crypto and blockchain world, one of the things that I believe is RWAs is the next wave of how we leverage blockchain into real world use cases, to where we have the world using blockchain on a daily basis and we're using those projects. So we have taken real world assets, food, and brought that into the blockchain. And my goal today is to show you exactly how we're doing that, how we're leveraging that, and our goals for the future. So quick backstory. Who the heck am I? Why should you listen to me? So when I was in college, I was actually a rugby player, and I loved health and fitness. And when I graduated and I stopped playing, I started buying up gyms. And so I ran CrossFit gyms. I bought a couple of them. And one of my best friends from college, a guy that I played rugby with, he called me one day and he said, "Hey, I'm a little fat. I've gained some weight. Can you help me lose it?" I said, "Absolutely." So I started working with him and his entire team. But the cool thing about him is if you look at these pictures on the right, that meat that I'm holding up and everything in the background is his family farm. And so what we realized was that if all he did was eat the food that his family grew, he lost weight, he felt better, and he had a more vital life. And that led to he and I looking at, man, this is amazing. If we just eat healthy food and we can track everything that's inside of that, everybody should feel better. And so that led, actually, this is my last day in my gym. So that was one of my CrossFit gyms. And I actually shut that down in order to found the company Grow United, which has the mission of nourishing people, animals, and the planet by leveraging blockchain. So I'm going to show you guys a software or a project that we're working on that has helped us track and trace food. We started building that about 7 years ago. And about 3 years ago, we ran into the blockchain. I was relatively unfamiliar at that point, other than the rest of the world with Bitcoin and Ethereum. But we knew that if we could have immutability and be able to track assets like you could in the digital world, but we could do it with real food and all of the assets that we were growing on the farms, that we really had something. And so about a year and a half ago, we launched the Grow blockchain with the goal to nourish people, so ourselves, the animals, and most importantly, the planet that we live on, and leverage blockchain in order to do it. So I'm going to go through today and show you the projects that we are doing to do this. Our overall vision is to decentralize the global ag and farming industry. Why is decentralization needed? So decentralization, if you look at this graphic right here, is definitely needed inside of the food and ag space, because there's 10 companies that essentially control the entire food industry. And we believe that anytime you get massive centralization, it leads to issues, and it leads to where the actual users and the people that are on the platform aren't the ones that are actually benefiting. And so our goal outside of all of our projects is to actually decentralize the food space and make sure that the users, or the people that are growing and the people that are eating food, actually can have power within it. And so we take that from a centralized system here on the left into a true blockchain. And I won't go too much into this because I know every single person in this conference knows what is blockchain, but our ability to have publicly shared data, have it be immutable, and then record and track real world assets in the digital world. And one thing that's really interesting on the publicly shared piece is just our ability to have data that we trust. One of the beauties that I look at in the entire blockchain space is our ability to have transparency, trust, and data ownership inside what is happening of the things on chain. And when you look at the food space, when you look at where our food comes from, maybe some of you have seen a documentary about what actually goes into our food or what actually goes into raising the animals. Most of that inside of the current centralized system are things most of us would not agree with. And then why the Grow blockchain? Some things that think about. One is node utility. So the way that we create true decentralization is everything is run off of a node network. For kind of some fun stats for everyone here that are familiar with miners and node networks, we currently have just under 24,000 active nodes processing data, putting data on chain, and mining our native Grow token today in over 144 countries. And we've done that over since January 16th, actually, of this year. Our token utility. So our token was just recently listed on CoinMarketCap as well as Coinbase. And then real assets and our team. We have a team of people. One of the biggest Bitcoin in the miners is behind our Bitcoin miners in North America is behind our project. And we just have real assets. You've heard me say it many times. I believe that the future of blockchain to the world is going to be tied to projects that can map real world assets inside of the digital world with their blockchain. So we have two people that we think about all the time. And most of you are going to fit into camp number 2, but camp number 1 is the producers and the farmers. We have to make the producers the hero of the story again. And here's an example to prove this. So this is one of our partner farms. They have about 17,000 acres and 50,000 cows on their farm. And in the US Thanksgiving in 2023, so that's in November, this was their Thanksgiving day. They had a massive fire that burned over $1 million of hay. And while most of us Americans were stuffing our face with pie and turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy, they had to go put out this entire fire where they lost all of that money, all of that hay, and all of that time. And nobody knows. The price that they sell that hay at, the price that they sell their beef at, their dairy at, that those cows that ate this hay is not reflected by anything that they went through. And that's a problem. The other one is most of us. So I'm going to make a bet here in a second with all of you, but we have to return our confidence and trust in the quality and source of our food. And here's my bet. So I'm willing to actually drop some of our tokens to anybody on this call, and you can tell me if you can win the bet in the chat, but you got to play with me for a second. So I want you to think about the last 72 hours, okay, the last 3 days. So for me, I'm in Puerto Rico right now, about 10:45 a.m. All I've had so far today is water. But yesterday I had some beef. I had a Philly cheesesteak sandwich. Think about the food that you ate and the things that you drank. And then I want you to think about, do you know where that food came from? And then do you know what went into growing that food? Do you know where it was planted? Do you know what went into it? Was there any fertilizer? If you had any animal products, do you know what that animal was fed? And then lastly, do you know the carbon footprint of that food that you ate? And if you can answer yes to any of those questions, then I will send you some Grow token and some Bitcoin. And the reason I'm so confident in that is I've given this presentation hundreds of times to tens of thousands of people, and I have never lost that bet. And that is the goal of the Grow blockchain, is to leverage blockchain technology to track real world assets so that every single one of us know exactly where our food came from, so that we can accomplish this mission of nourishing the world with transparency, traceability, and trust. And so the Grow blockchain ecosystem is a blockchain for all agriculture related products and services. So the way we think about this is we are the base layer. We are a layer 1 blockchain for anything that can become in this space. So it looks very similar to this slide right here. We have these companies here that we have partnered with to help track and trace where things are grown, trace the food supply chain, distribute, creating an online digital marketplace that accepts both fiat and cryptocurrencies, to capture carbon and track the chain of custody of those credits? How do we help using and leveraging the crypto space to help farmers get out of the banking space and actually finance themselves? And then how do we educate every single person about this? And that is the Grow blockchain. So it's an agricultural focused, highly versatile platform meant for deep integrations across an entire ecosystem of ag tech opportunities. And so now I want to show you some of our projects that currently exist. So this is an app that my best friend and I developed that led us into the blockchain world, and it's called FarmTracer. And so right now you can go to farmtracer.com, and when you type that in, if you put in, I'm going to put all of you, I'll actually put in the chat right now, 64761 is the number. So if you type in 64761 or you scan this QR code, what that will actually do is it will show you everything that went into that food. And so the mission of this project specifically is to create consumer trust through transparent production. And what happens in this is on that QR code, you scan that QR code, and then it shows you everything about that piece of beef. So it shows you where it was born, where it was grown, or where it grew up, everything that it ate down to the half of a pound, and it shows you where it was killed and the carbon footprint of that cow. Now, why does this matter? Why is this even cool? So I'm going to make another bet with all of you that you know the company Amazon. And so Amazon, a few years ago, bought the Climate Pledge Arena. This is where the old NBA team, the Seattle, or not the Seahawks, the Supersonics used to play. And when they bought it, they named the arena Climate Pledge Arena, and they came up with all of these stipulations on the food that could come in. So they had to be carbon neutral, it had to be locally grown. And Royal Ranch was the only beef that fit all of the stipulations because they were tracking and tracing their inputs using our FarmTracer project. Well, that is now a multiple seven-figure annual contract and has led to partnerships with the NHL team, the Kraken, and the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks. In fact, in about 4 days, our partner ranch, Royal Family Farming, will be having a farmers market with the Seattle Seahawks to feed them throughout their upcoming season with blockchain tracked food. We're also using the same technology with some partners in the cannabis supply chain. So if you look at the food industry, it's a voluntary market, meaning that they don't have to track and trace everything right now, but in the cannabis space, they have to. And so we're helping people get their strains on the blockchain and track and trace inside of our project. And so FarmTracer provides anonymous traceability, data and transparency, and immutability. And this is a really big key. Like most of us in the Web3 space, we care about our data, we care about ownership. It's the same with producers and farmers. They do not want their data out to a centralized or governing body. But when you put in the blockchain and the ability to run their own nodes and be able to own their data, they are then willing to put this data into the blockchain, which is a massive step forward for humanity, because now with that data owned inside of a decentralized blockchain, we can then know what are the best practices to actually grow food. And that leads us into our next project, which we call Carbon Ag, which is helping create a carbon neutral world by 2050. The mission of this is to nourish the earth through regenerative farming sequestration. And if you're unfamiliar with carbon credits, let me just give you a high level overview. There's this market that exists today to buy credits, and credits can be received by mitigation, which is focusing on reducing the amount of carbon that you emit, or where we focus, which is sequestration. And this focuses on capturing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in natural sinks or human-made systems. And so one way to do this is actually with cattle. And so one of our partners owns the largest worm farm in the world. And what he does, if any of you have been around cows, they poop and they pee a lot. Well, instead of this poop and pee going into a big pool or a big sewage pipe, what one of our farmers actually does is he takes all of it, runs it through pipes, and then sprinkles it over the largest worm bed in the world. And what happens is those worms eat all of that waste, the poop that came from the cow. and they turn it into worm castings. And in that process, they actually sequester carbon. And so this market right here, if you look at this, in 2023, the carbon credit market was $414 billion and is set to be over $1 trillion by 2030. So our partner was able to make multiple seven figures in profit the last 2 years by taking these carbon credits, using good regenerative sustainable practices that nourish the world, and then sell those. And so what we are able to do with the blockchain is solve a massive problem in this space. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, transparency and traceability issues are expected to hamper the growth of the market. So what has happened in this carbon credit space is you've had these amazing regenerative practices that nourish the earth that then create a credit, and then those credits are sold. Well, no one was tracking or verifying well the information that was actually going in to create a carbon credit. And so you have massive Fortune 100 companies like Delta who buy a credit that they don't know exactly where it's come from or the data that went into it. And now they're in $1 billion lawsuit because they claimed carbon neutrality via buying carbon credits, but the credits that they were buying were actually falsified. And so what we do in the Grow blockchain as well is we create an NFT, and inside of that NFT, we put all of the data and the verification to actually create that credit from the originator. And then we follow the chain of custody of that credit from where it was originated all the way into where it was bought, where it was purchased, and then what it was used against to claim carbon neutrality. We also have partners that work with us in grow boxes. So right now you see these boxes on the right. These can grow the equivalent of 160 acres of wheat in one box using 2% of the water. And what's cool about that is we could take that all over the world to provide renewable, sustainable, and cost-efficient food that combats climate change to improve the welfare of animals and people on the planet. And why animal feed with that product? Because 60% of all animal ag costs come from feed. 30% of all fresh water worldwide is used for animal feed. And there's a $350 billion total addressable market for animal feed. And so with our technology, we can actually go in and take the data. These boxes are actually run by AI, and that AI puts all of the data into the blockchain, and then we can see what are the best practices to grow and feed our animals, especially in places like Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Africa, where they don't have enough water to grow animals and feed animals like we do in places in Europe and the United States. And so our last big piece is what we call our Nourish Marketplace. And this is a direct-to-consumer digital marketplace that connects us with the origins of our food. So it takes all of our projects and it says, hey, we can actually buy food that is fully traced on the blockchain, completely immutable, and we can use crypto to do it. And so this is alpha tested right now. We have multiple partners and more adding every single day to both use our native Grow token as well as other crypto and fiat currency to buy food or real world assets that have been tracked and traced on the blockchain. And so I always like to talk about how can people be involved with what we're doing. If anything that I say resonated with you today, here's how you can be involved with us, because Web 1, 2, and 3. So I know most of us here come from the blockchain space, but I like to reiterate it. Web 1 was the information economy. It was when Google and Yahoo came along, and all of a sudden, the entire world had this information at their fingertips. Then the platform economy came along. That's where we as consumers were able to start creating, and it made it much easier. So the social media platforms, the Shopifys of the world, the Wix, the Squarespaces, the WordPresses, all of a sudden now it was much easier to go create inside of this digital world and build on it. However, it was still owned by a centralized company. Well, Web 3 becomes the ownership economy. It becomes where we as the consumers, producers, and users, we own it. We can govern it. We know what to do on it. And the blockchain is the answer for that piece. And so one, we get set up a free Grow wallet, buy and support our producers, if we as consumers can support the producers that are actually willing to take the jump and say, hey, I want to put my data on a blockchain, I want to run a node, I want to help build this. And lastly is run a grow node. And so running those nodes to help us store our data, verify all of our food transactions, provide consensus, mine and distribute the grow token, and have true immutable tracking, transparency, and trust back inside of the food system so that we can go from a centralized world, a centralized system, and centralized companies into what we view as the essence of blockchain, which is true decentralization, power back to the users, and ownership to the producers and the users that are creating and consuming inside of the mission and the project of that specific blockchain project. And that is the Grow blockchain, using and leveraging blockchain technology to nourish people, animals, and the planet.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Will, for making such a great presentation. I actually have a question that I like to discuss with different experts of our conference, not only our conference, but within our community also. And the question is that, when we have a look on different solutions, on different technologies and innovation, it seems like the technology side of everything is it's pretty clear how to fix a certain problem in across different industries, including food supply and so on. But so the main problem seems to be that people are not able to negotiate with each other so that we could quickly adapt the technology. What's your ideas about? What are your ideas about mass adoption and about doing some kind of faster user acquisition for such solutions?
Yeah, this is a great question because we think about this often. And with our market, particularly, everybody has to eat. And so people ask me all the time, like, hey, who is your market? And we have two of them. I broke them down already. One of them is the producers, and the other one is everybody that has to eat. And so to have massive adoption for us, we drive it on, we need to get producers on the platform, because we actually believe that we could drive mass adoption into our community. And we've seen this because people want to know where their food comes from. When we come in and say we have a solution to say, hey, do you want to know what you ate today? Do you want to know what went into that? People want that. So on our side, it's the producers, it's the farmers that can say, hey, I'll actually do this and I'll provide that. And so where we spend a lot of our time is going in and getting the producers that are willing, can ship, and are vertically integrated to provide the supply for the demand that we already have. So that's where we spend most of our time. The second side to that, though, is you actually have a pull side. So I look at that as the push side. We get producers that are coming in, but if we want to pull it, it's us as consumers. It's us. Where do we spend our hard-earned dollars or hard-mined crypto, right? And so when we raise our hand and say, hey, I'm willing to maybe spend a little bit more in shipping, or I'm willing to spend a little bit more for good food to reward directly to those producers that are willing to grow it in a sustainable way and track and trace it on the blockchain, that's what helps the most, is us raising our hand and saying we'll do it. And then that drives more producers coming to the platform.
Okay, yeah, thanks. And I'm sure that you had lots of conversations with producers, with different producers, and how open are they to being onboarded on such solutions? I mean, is it easy for them, and do they welcome you when you try to speak about blockchain technologies, innovation, and stuff?
Sometimes. So most farmers in the world, you talk about blockchain and that feels a little bit more innovative and like a foreign language to them. And so we usually come in without blockchain, but then teaching them blockchain on the backside. Here's what producers across the world are not okay with. They are not okay with giving their data and their processes to a centralized system. And so when any government or centralized organization comes in and says, we want to know what you do, they refuse and do not want to do that. In fact, they put up a pretty big fight. However, when we help them understand that this data ownership model and the model of the entire business is not centralized and it's actually owned by them and inside of a blockchain, then they open up very quickly and they can start to see that this is the future, and this is part of the disruption of what can take over that centralized system to where they are not owned by the commodity market or a governing board that decides to regulate them however they want.
Okay, I think that was the last question, and we are good to proceed to our next talk. Yeah, Will, thank you so much for sharing such a great presentation and for providing your answers to my questions. I think we will receive a couple of questions after we publish this video as a recording on our YouTube channel. I will let you know if there will be some. Yeah, I wish you good luck in your future with your product and with making all the producers onboarded. Yeah, thank you once again. Hope to collaborate with you in the future.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think we will now have a 1-minute transition before we start our today's concluding presentation about CBDCs, the past, present, and the future of it. Let me have a 1-minute break and we'll be back. Please stay tuned.